the one I had forgotten in Mrs. Walsh's room. So I did notice that some of you in your first rotation were using informational books, right? Some of you had photographs instead of illustrations. And I think that really works too, because when you think about animals, especially, animals are expressive, right? One of your classmates was reading a book that had lobsters and crabs in it. And when you imagine, do it with me, when you imagine a claw open like this, right? And if you imagine, right, safely going towards someone with an open claw, that gives you a feeling, right? Yeah. A feeling of attack or anger if you're the one with the claws coming at, right? A little fear. And so even if you have photographs in the books you're reading, you can still pull from that something from that text feature. Okay? So reminding ourselves that our objective is to look at different aspects, right? Just like we have different body parts, you have different aspects of a photograph. So I want to dig deeper into some of the illustrations from Patricia Polacco, and this time I'm going to use a different book. So the first time we used Thank You, Mr. Faulkner, but now I have a different one of her books, okay? The Junkyard Wonders, and I'm curious, the same characters here. So as third graders, you're expected to be able to look at different books, same author, maybe even same characters, and say, what can we pull from these illustrations? Is it the same? So again, you should be on the side where you can do some documenting. So your side looks like this. And as I show you an illustration, I want you to think about, what does that illustration convey? What does that illustration convey? So what do I see and what does it make me think? So let's see if we're thinking and feeling the same things. So a lot of times, it's important to pay attention to the setting or what's surrounding that main piece. Here is part of that main illustration, but I'm noticing what's around them, right? When I look at different aspects, I'm looking at different pieces of the illustration. So zoom in on something, one aspect of what you're seeing. It could be here, it could be here, it could be there. What are you seeing? Jot it down. What are you seeing? And what does that make me think? Because sometimes I look at facial expressions of the characters. That can tell me something. Sometimes the illustrator shows us more about the setting. The setting tells us something. Like here's an example. Do you notice that based on what they're wearing and the setting of the illustration, this is probably a story from the past? Because based on the way the girls especially are dressed, I'm looking at the type of shoes. I'm using my prior knowledge and telling myself that this is probably from the 50s or 60s as far as the time, the setting of the story in the past. What I'm also noticing is that I'm zooming into this aspect. I'm seeing the whispering. Right? I'm seeing the hands up and the giggling. And to me, when I see something like this, that doesn't always mean a good thing, does it? It gives it a feeling of secrecy, of being left out. And so for me, that's what I might notice. As I zoom in, I'm going to zoom in on this aspect. And based on what I see, maybe you're seeing something different, and that's just fine. But based on what I see hands over mouth, right? So that's what I wrote. I wrote what I saw. I see hands over mouth. What does that make me think or feel? Well, like I said, it makes me think or feel that there is some kind of secrecy going on. I don't think I spelled that right. It also makes me think of being left out, right? If someone's whispering, it must mean that someone else is feeling left out of what's going on. Now the challenge is, can I go to the text and prove it, right? So now let's go to my words. Let's see if I'm right, okay? So I'm going to skim through. Ooh, what I noticed at the beginning, my heart sang as I walked to school with all the kids on my grandma's block. Now, that doesn't quite tell us what I was seeing, does it? So let's keep reading. Let's see. In my old school in California, the kids all knew that I had just learned to read, that I used to be dumb. Those are powerful words, aren't they? Yeah. To feel that about yourself, that gives us her mood, right? She used to feel not very confident, but now it sounds like she's changed. She feels better about herself. But when I got to the front steps of the school, all the neighborhood kids ran off to their classes. And when I saw saw Kay and waved to her, she didn't wave back. I just stood there not knowing where to go, and when I showed two strange girls my class card, right, that again tells me from the past, right, we don't get class cards anymore, right, to say like your classes. My class card, they got funny looks on their faces. You're in Mrs. Peterson's class, they said, upstairs, room 206. Now, so far, I have to say the only text that tells me that I'm right is the piece here. I stood there not knowing what to do, right? And then here, they got funny looks on their faces. So far, proof that I'm right, I could say funny looks, strange girls, right? Because that word strange could give you the feeling of being left out, right? She doesn't know. Okay, strange girls. And then also, this especially, not knowing where to go. Now you try it. Okay, I'll put this up. Okay, let's try a different page.
Oh, now
Okay, now you try it. Either on your own or talking to an elbow partner. If your marker ran out, you could be using theirs together. But there's a lot going on here. We have stuff in the background. We have stuff going on in the center. Illustrators make moves to give us information. I'll give you about 30 seconds. I should see it on your switchboard. What's something you see, think.
when you're a funny girl, marker won't come off my board.
I was just jotting. Okay, so what do you see there? What do you see? So remember, look at one aspect. Zoom in on something. What do you see? And then what does it make you feel?
Can I get a white for my mark?
No, you can just start working, please.
About 10 seconds. 10. Zoom in. What do you see? 5. And 1. So now I'm going to read you a little bit of the text, and I want you listening for, does anything that I read confirm what you have? Because we're looking at, does the illustration convey or express anything more than the words? So based on what you have down, leave it there. All right, you always want to leave it there. Based on what you have, or based on what your neighbor has, maybe you want to work with them, let's see if you're right. When I got home that night, I told Dad and Grandma about my day. I tried to be brave and to not let them know how sad I really was. So some of you saw the tears in her eyes, the red face. That would confirm that what you're thinking. But just as Dad was tucking me in at bedtime, I finally burst into tears. Oh, Taddy, I've been put in a special class again. It's called the junkyard. Junkyard? What junkyard, my dad asked. Well, that's what everybody calls my class. So now that makes sense on what I was thinking on the first page, right? When all the kids were whispering and laughing. Does that make sense why they were doing that?
Yeah.
Not right, was it? But that confirms what I was thinking about my documentation. They weren't being very nice. Darling, my dad said, you're not a quitter. Stick it out for a month. If the class doesn't get better, I promise I'll send you back to California. Because if you remember from the Mr. Faulkner book, that's where she first lived. So this is still Trisha, but now Trisha is in Michigan living with her dad. So it's the same character, and I think she was hoping school would be better this time. But right now, not yet. I didn't tell him that when I tried to sit with Kay and her friends at lunch. She said that junkyard kids couldn't sit at the table. So again, if you go back to what I documented about that first picture, right? The first picture I saw, it made me think that, well, I see kids with their hands over their mouth, right? Like they're whispering. It made me think that she might have a feeling of being left out. Anything that supported it? Well, yeah, the funny looks. She didn't know where to go. Could I add on now? Now I could even add on that the text says her class is called Junkyard Class. So you don't always have to go back and add something new that you see. As you keep reading, it might confirm more of what you're thinking is right. So I really want to challenge you as you go off into your rotations to think about the illustrations, right? I'm not just looking at, well, I see a sad face. We have to ask ourselves why, right? So there's your reminder what to look for up here, okay? When you're thinking about the mood of the story, we're looking for color, right? A lot of times illustrators will use different colors. So if you're writing a book or writing a story, think about your color. If I use lots of browns and blacks, what kind of mood am I sending?
Sad.
Kind of sad, even spooky, depressed, right? Dark. If I use lots of bright colors, it's a mood of happiness, right? Growth, joy.
Proud.
Think about your characters, right? We were able to look at her face and say, what does her face tell us? So if you're drawing characters, if they're standing like this, they're brave. If they're standing like this, sad, unsure of themselves. Same with animals, right? Some animals will be like about to attack, right? Claws open. Other animals will be more curled up.
Like an armadillo.
Absolutely, right? An armadillo would have a personality maybe of cowardice, right? Could be.
Those show up.
Also look for clues. Here's an example of a clue in the story. Sometimes, especially when the illustrator is really sneaky, they like to put in extra details. So things like this. If you have a chance to read this book, it really is a great book filled with a lot of different emotions. Okay. A lot of the details, right? I could zoom in and I'm seeing a lot of different things in the background. I'm also seeing that seasonal change, right? In some of the beginning of the book, it was more of a fallish time. The book goes through all the seasons. So sometimes even books can give you clues about the setting of the story, right? Here I see someone being comforted by the teacher. So really challenge yourself to say, what am I seeing in illustration? And what does it convey about what I think about this story? Okay? If anyone would like to, if there's time left in your rotation to read some of this, you're more than welcome to. Okay.
I want to read it. Sounds like a nice book already.
So would they be off in the next rotation, or do you think will they stay?
No, they'll
Okay.
Yep.
All right. I'm going to take your switchboards with you.
I read this somewhere. I don't know if I do.
Yes, thank you. And that one you probably have in your library. Junkyard Wonders is a newer one. I don't know if they have that. Did we get through this rotation?